Howard, welcome.
Thanks so much, Magdalena. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I feel very honored.
Yes, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Today, we're talking all about the process behind writing a book. And I read somewhere that 86% of the population wants to write a book, but only 1% do. So this is actually a great, segue into the conversation there that we're about to have. So what is your reaction to that? Why do you think that only 1% of the population actually end up writing a book? What's your perspective on that?
I believe that a lot of people want to write a book just because I talk to so many people who have said the exact same thing. Like, I wanted to write a book for a decade or 20 years, or I started one 2 years ago and just, never got around to finishing it. I think the biggest thing is that it's not easy. Um,
Yes.
it's a commitment. So I think that's the hardest part, is that you really have to, if you're going to write a book, you need to say, regardless of anything else going on, I'm going to commit to getting this done, uh, whatever that takes. And that's really hard. I think there are also a few mindset things that people have. I think people
Mm,
think I need to arrive before I can write a book. Um,
yes.
you know what I mean? Or like other people know more than I do.
Yes.
And those are valid concerns, but the, they shouldn't stop anybody from writing a book because everybody has their own experiences and their own knowledge that's completely different than anybody else, and so that gives them the right and the authority to write a book.
Yes. Realistically, we're not reinventing the wheel in terms of the ideas that we're bringing forward. But what is different is your experience that you're bringing forward is unique, and it's your story that you're sharing with others. And it's that perspective that's making the difference. So the information may be the same, but it's the story that you're adding on top of it and how it's being received that really makes a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say, really, for if we're talking about like nonfiction books here, it's
Yeah.
really the stories that make all the difference.
Yes.
That's what people remember, and that's what people use to kind of get to know the author. So, like when you read a book and they're telling these personal stories, you kind of feel like, oh, I know this person. And for
Yes.
somebody who's considering writing a book, what's great about that is that it builds a level of trust that any other marketing tool can't really do. When you have a book and you hear these personal stories, it feels like you know that person. And there's
Yes.
a old adage that we buy from people we know, like, and trust, and so the
Yes.
book kind of is the shortcut to building that trust.
That's correct. And so if someone does want to start and wants to write a book, where do they begin? What would you recommend? What's the starting point?
The starting point is really why. Like,
Yeah.
why do you want to write a book? Um, I think if you're grounded in a strong why, that is what's going to allow you to have that commitment to carry through when you don't feel like writing, when you don't feel like editing. There's just a lot of obstacles to overcome. So if you have a strong why about why you want to do that, that's going to keep you um, just in the game and realize that there is an important reason to do this. And I think the why is different for everyone, but I think the best whys are ones that aren't focused on yourself, but
Mhm.
more focused on your reader,
Yes.
where it's, I want to write this book because I know I can help people who are
Yes.
struggling with something I went through, or, who need help doing a certain thing that I've kind of figured out a shortcut to, or whatever the reason might be.
Yeah. So you have the why, a strong why. And then what's next? I know that there's the option of self-publishing or going to a publishing house. How easy or hard is it to do one of these?
I would say there are a few steps before you even get
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would say, once you know your why, you have to sort of define who you're talking to.
Right.
Like, who is your audience?
Yeah.
You know, getting a clear picture of who that person is, and not just like demographics, but more like psychographics. Like, what do
Mm,
these people think and believe and feel? You want your reader to really feel seen and heard in your book.
yeah.
You know, like, you want them to look at it and be like, "Oh my gosh, how do they know this about me?"
Yeah.
And I think that comes from defining your audience. I think it's really important for a book to have a core message, just a very simple but powerful, um, statement or belief that carries through the entire book, a central theme, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, and then, I think the best books also have a promise. Like by the end of this book, you will gain something. So what is your promise to your reader?
Right.
So you know, and that's just the very beginning, but then even I think then you can, even before you start reading, think about how you want to bring to life, how you want it to get published, like you were saying. So really, there are 3 different paths. The first one is traditional publishing,
Hmm.
the second one is, self-publishing, and the third one is hybrid publishing.
Yeah.
So traditional publishing is like if Random House or Simon and Schuster or Scholastic or whoever is going to publish your book.
And I'm
Um,
assuming that those are sort of reserved for likely experienced authors. Like, do they take on sort of, new authors? What's your perspective on that?
so the big publishers will only look at manuscripts from agents. So if you have your heart set on the big 5 publishers like Random House, Simon and Schuster, and 3 others, I can't remember their names, but
Yes.
yeah, if you have your heart set with them, like just a regular Joe Schmo can't send a manuscript to them. So
Okay.
you would have to get an agent first, and then the agent can submit to the bigger publishers. But that said, there are plenty of like small and medium sized publishers that
Mm,
do accept manuscripts from writers that don't have an agent.
got
Um,
it.
yeah,
And
it's like
how
for
easy is it to get an agent?
it, 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 I think that's a big question. It depends. It was
Yeah.
very difficult for me. Like I write children's books too,
Yeah.
and I had 9 books traditionally published before I got an agent. So for me,
Mm,
it was much easier to get published through a smaller but traditional publisher than it was to get an agent. Um, I mean, it's the same process for trying to get published as it is to get an agent. You have to have your manuscript. You have to then write them a query letter, which is here's what my book's about, and
wow.
then it's it's tough because first you have to like also find who these agents are. It's like,
Yes.
okay, I've written a book about this. Which agents accept manuscripts and are
Right.
also looking for this topic?
Yes.
So, yeah, so the traditional route, I think, has a lot of. I wanted to go that way with my books because I like the validity of it. I feel like there's a certain level of credibility when you do have
Absolutely.
your book traditionally published. Um, but that said, there's nothing wrong with the other approaches. It's like the second method message mentioned is self-publishing, and
Hmm.
that's like literally like you kind of do it all yourself. You hire somebody to design the cover, you hire somebody to lay out the interior of the book, and then you hire a publisher to print it. And that's
Wow.
probably the fastest and least costly direction to go in.
And so if you had to put sort of a time estimate and a cost estimate on that, just high level, it doesn't have to be exact, just to give people a sense for what that might be.
Yeah, so I think if you're self-publishing, it could literally cost zero if you do
Mm,
it like through like Amazon has something called Kindle Direct Publishing (KDP),
okay.
and like you could go in there today, you upload a manuscript, upload a cover, or like they have templates you could use for the cover, and you
Gosh.
could, yeah, you could literally have a book on Amazon
Wow.
today, and
Really? Wow. That's so
yeah,
amazing. I had no idea.
yeah, I mean it's wild, but the thing is, the whole nobody in the world is going to see your book unless you also are like really good at marketing on Amazon.
Yes. Yes.
So, it's a double-edged sword. It's like, yes, it's the most cost effective because, you can get your book out there for basically next to nothing. But,
Hmm.
it's competing against millions and millions of titles. So getting it noticed is, a whole nother story. And that's where kind of
Yes.
marketing comes in. And then just the third route for publishing is called hybrid publishing.
Hmm.
And, probably like 10, 20 years ago, it had a bad rap and people called it vanity publishing because it was just people were just going this way because they just wanted to have a book in their name out in the world.
Mhm.
But it's become real, like a very legitimate way to go. It's a lot like traditional publishing as far as the quality and the distribution. Like if you want your book in a bookstore, so it has that same kind of effect as traditional publishing. The only difference is that the author, pays for the hybrid publisher. So, so that's
Okay. And
the
so
big
they
difference.
cover like 80% of the cost, 70% of the cost, or does it vary from publisher to publisher?
Yeah, the author pays 100%.
Oh,
So
really? Okay.
yes. So,
Okay.
I mean, I don't it's gonna depend on the publisher and, exactly what you're doing, but I would say probably at a minimum, it would be like $15,000, and
Mm,
that's, kinda just getting the book kinda printed, um, as a and then there's, like, marketing and, if you need editing and that sort of thing, there are all kinds of add-ons. But yeah, it's costly, and, with traditional publishing, the author doesn't pay a penny up front.
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the publisher takes on all the financial burden, and then the author gets paid either with, an advance,
Mm,
and royalties, or just royalties. And an advance is basically like, "Oh, this publisher agrees to publish your book. They'll pay you $10,000 upfront,
yeah.
but then your book has to earn that much in
Yes.
royalties before you start getting more than that initial payout."
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
And I've also heard of some authors that started off as self publishing because that's all that was sort of available to them, only for their book to be very successful and then getting the offers, with the traditional publishing houses, which makes sense, right? They want to see you do well before they make you an offer.
Right, yeah, and that's, great because it's so competitive. There's so many people, trying to get traditionally published. But yeah, if you have a track record of, my book sold,
Yeah.
40,000 copies with me just doing it on my own, that would definitely catch the eye of a traditional publisher, and,
Yeah.
then they would wanna take that on.
Yeah. I've also heard of some authors kind of, changing between publishers because I guess just like everything else, it's about alignment, right? The working relationship, the values. I think I heard this about Mel Robinson, Mel
Yeah.
Robbins. Is it
Mel
Mel
Robbins, yeah.
Robbins? That her initial book was perhaps with one of these hybrid publishers. It didn't
Mhm.
do so well, and as that book was being published and released, she started her podcast and she was getting like a big audience out there, a big name for herself. And Hay House came in and made her an offer for the second book that's just been released. This is the one, Let Them. I think that's the
Let
one.
them, yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, because Let Them did so well with Hay House, all of a sudden the first book that she released that wasn't doing so well started doing well as well. But it was with a completely different publisher. And supposedly she didn't have much of a good relationship. There was a lot of tension there. She talked about it in one of her podcasts. So I could see that, happening for some people as well.
Yeah, like, for my children's books, 5 different publishers have put them out, and it's just
Oh,
kind of like
really?
what's
Okay.
appealed to them, yeah. But I would think if you're like, like a James Patterson or,
Hmm.
J.K. Rowling, that one publisher is gonna lock you in and wanna work with you all the time.
Yeah. Now, the other piece that I think would be interesting for everyone to hear about is the option of having a ghostwriter, and you're a ghostwriter yourself. So, talk to
Mhm.
us a little bit about this process. Like, when would you engage a ghostwriter? Is it right at the beginning? Can you engage them perhaps in the middle and at the end? Because I could see some people wanting to do it themselves first. Because I've heard that it's very therapeutic to write a book, especially if you are pulling in your own sort of personal stories. So I could see people wanting to do it if they're doing it for the first time. And at the same time, I could see people get overwhelmed and say, what am I thinking? I can't do this. I need a ghostwriter. So are there sort of rules and best practices as to when to engage a ghostwriter?
Yeah, I would say there are no rules at what works best for each individual person. I would say if a person wants to write the whole book themselves, that they don't need a ghostwriter at all, that they would want, what's called a developmental editor, and that's
Okay.
somebody yeah, who can really work with them on the structure of the book,
Mhm.
the content, and then, that's what they would need if they wanted to do it themselves. But if somebody's maybe has written some things here and there, or hasn't written anything but has this kind of idea and the burning desire to write a book, then uh, connecting with a ghostwriter would be a way to go because in my mind, the most valuable thing a ghostwriter brings is like the book you've been dreaming about will actually get done,
Mhm.
because the ghostwriter, needs to get paid. And if
Yeah.
you, as the author of the book, have paid this person, now you kind of have a fire under yourself to like get your money's worth by getting this book written. Uh,
Yeah.
it it gives you like skin in the game. But
Right.
as far as the process with the ghostwriter, you know, the way I work with clients, it's literally just like what we're doing here. It's just conversations. Um,
Mhm.
so we'll just have weekly conversations about what we start where what I talked about before with like who's why do you want to write this book? Who's the target audience? What's the core message? What's the promise you want with your book? And then we start, talking about like what the content will be. And
Yeah.
then just through kind of like weekly interviews, we start, developing just like the content for the book.
Mm. And how do you make sure that it actually sounds like the author? So I could see, for instance, Howard has his own way of writing, and then Magdalena has her own way of writing. And someone that knows me well will should be able to read something and say, "This doesn't sound like her." Like, how do you make
Mhm.
sure that you're actually sounding like Magdalena? Like, what strategies do you use to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think like modern technology has made it a lot easier because like when I interview people,
Yeah.
I I use Google Meet, and then as soon as the interview's over, like 20 minutes later, I'll get a complete transcript of the entire interview.
Mm.
So when I'm then working on the book, I literally have the author's words and the way they've,
Right.
phrased things.
Got
So,
it.
I have it right there and it's much easier than, just trying to remember things from notes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I have the video interview as well, so I could go back to that and see, how they phrase things. And I think, there is a distinction between like somebody's speaking voice and like what their literary voice is. So
Yes.
it's just like, someone might talk a certain way, but that doesn't mean that they'll write a certain way. But
Mhm.
still, like, yeah, the role I think a good ghostwriter, uh, knows how to capture the author's voice, so the book does sound like theirs.
Yeah. And so if someone does engage a ghostwriter, they go through the process, they finish the book. Um, do credits go to the ghostwriter? Do you get a portion of the sales? Like, how does that sort of work?
Yeah, so that is completely up to the author, and so the
Got
author is the person whose book it is. And so if you ever see a book that, on the title it says, I'll just say, Mel Robbins, but then if it says with, Bob Smith, if it says
Mhm.
with, then that person is the
Got
ghostwriter.
it.
But like
Okay.
the author is under no obligation to acknowledge a ghostwriter. So
Mm,
it's really the author's, prerogative what they want to do.
yeah.
And then as far as payment, as far as I know, all ghostwriters just get paid a flat fee as
Got it.
opposed to taking part in the royalties.
Yeah. And how long is that process? So let's say if someone, started today, what's on average, sort of how long does that process take with a ghostwriter? And is it faster than writing on your own? It could be. I could see that being a bit faster because you're sort of on schedule with a ghostwriter.
Yeah, I mean, it again kind of comes down to commitment. Like if you're the author and you lock yourself in a cabin for a few months, then you could probably get it done. But yeah, I mean, the average that I'm seeing is it takes about 3 months for the interviews.
Mm,
So that's kind of like weekly interviews, and that equals about 12 or so interviews, and then it's about another 3 months to actually have the manuscript written,
yep.
and then probably another month or 2, for editing and getting the manuscript where you want it. So it's really, it's a long process,
Yeah.
6 to 8 months, and I would say that's another reason going back to your first question about why, people don't finish their books or don't write the books, it's because it's a really long process. You really have to be committed
Right.
to it.
Yeah, and I could see, life happens,
Mhm.
responsibilities don't go away. I could see
Yeah.
how that, that really sort of, takes over. And so what strategies do you have, that you have sort of learned along the way that you share with the authors?
Well, what's great is, like, I set up the meetings, so it's just like they don't
Yes.
have that excuse anymore. It's just like, "Here's your invite for next week's meeting, here's the next one."
Get the work
Um,
done.
yeah, so it goes back to that commitment thing as well. It's just like, um, I've become their accountability partner in a way and make sure they're committed because, I'm setting up these meetings
Yeah.
and I'm incentivized to keep it going because the faster, the ghostwriter does the work, the faster the ghostwriter gets paid because usually there are milestones. Like,
Mhm.
I break it into 4 milestones. First is the initial contract. I'll get a quarter of the payment.
Yeah.
After the interviews are complete, I'll get the second, quarter of the payment.
Yeah.
Once the first manuscript is delivered, I'll get the third, payment.
Yeah.
And then when everything is completed, that's when I'll get the final payment.
Got it. So you through the process, the first manuscript is written, and now the marketing part of it comes into play. I would have to believe that it would be in the author's best interest to start doing the marketing ahead of time versus waiting for the book launch.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point to bring up because it's so tough to get,
Yes.
get your book noticed. And even
Yeah.
if you're working with a traditional publisher, they're
Yeah.
not gonna put a lot of marketing dollars behind it if you're like an unknown entity.
Yeah.
So I would say, like at a minimum is 6 months, but really, I mean, you could start as soon as you have the idea. Like,
Yeah.
you could literally say, do a post on Facebook saying,
Yeah.
"I'm thinking of writing a book about X, Y, and Z. What do you think? Do you think this would
Yeah.
be of interest to you?"
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like almost, kind of doing research on your topic before you've got
Yes. Yeah.
started. Let it also start generating that early interest. And, I think people like to see kind of like also, the behind the scenes thing. So you could, show your Post-it notes or, show your, first draft of your manuscript or show yourself writing earlier in the morning,
Yeah.
to get the work done. So I think those things would kind of build momentum.
I actually did hear this from one of the publishing houses. They suggested start a TikTok account where you're not connected to your family and friends and just start, putting that stuff out there. Best way to test out ideas. So if you have
Yeah.
7 chapters, put the chapters out there, see what the responses is like. What are the people saying? How are they reacting? It's the best way.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, you could even, join Facebook groups related to your content. Um,
Yes.
and just, yeah, start seeing where that audience lives that you're writing to and try to connect to them that way. And sharing your ideas there will help you maybe even refine your idea and get other thoughts for your book.
Mhm. And once the book, launches, hopefully you've built enough of a platform to get the excitement out there. Anything else that would work from a marketing perspective that you found to be very effective? Like I've seen, so for instance, if I go back to one of the guests that I interviewed, her name is Sylvie. She did a lot of traditional sort of TV interviews, articles. Do those still work, do you find, in 2026? Or is it more about social and podcasts? What's your perspective on that?
I would say, any publicity that you can get is a good thing, whether it's more traditional media or more social media. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just, there's so many people kind of competing for attention
Mhm.
that, yeah, if you do a magazine article, that still carries weight and somebody might come across it that'd be interested in your book. And then you just never know, where that person might lead to because that person might have connections to
Yeah.
connect you with other people to lead to more opportunities to reach people.
I also heard that when you're self-publishing, it's that much more difficult to get your book into a bookstore. Is that true?
So I don't honestly know. I
Yeah.
would say yes, as far as the self-publishing route,
Mhm.
especially like if you do the Kindle, the Amazon publishing,
Yeah.
like if it's there, it's only there. Um, there's another resource like that called Ingram Spark, where I
Okay.
believe that they have a way to also have like a more traditionally published book.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I would say that's right, that it is much more difficult if you're self-published, to get it into bookstores.
yeah. And then um, let's talk about um, books where there's an option of translating it into different languages. So, do you decide on that sort of right away? Do you decide on that after? And how do you decide whether or not you should be translating them? Because I also heard, and I think it was again through Hay House that and I forget the name of the lady, the author, but for whatever reason, her book wasn't doing so well in US, but it completely took off in Germany. And I don't know how she translated it to, I don't know if she was, maybe family background in Germany, but it completely took off in Germany and then worldwide before it got to US. So
Oh,
how
wow.
does that happen? When do you decide whether you should be, does it happen automatically? Are they translated automatically?
No, so that's the benefit of going with a traditional publisher in my mind is that
Yeah.
they handle all of that. So, like the publisher that will try to sell foreign rights of your book,
Mhm.
um, so which is great because they handle everything. They're experts at it, and then the author gets paid, for those rights, and the royalties of the books that are published in other languages.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would have no idea how you would go about doing it without a traditional publisher. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
services
Yeah.
that do that, but, yeah, traditional publisher handles all of that.
Yeah. And then there's also audiobooks, obviously. And then I've also heard of just very interesting stories where the audiobooks did much better than the hardcover books because the author has, well, number one, he or she has the option of, reading themselves or hiring someone to do that. They recommend that you do it. And
Mhm.
that they also have the option of adding a few more stories. And that's the part
Mm,
that seems to resonate with people.
yeah, yeah, I mean, that's true about audiobooks, just people are that's how people are consuming that content these days, and,
Mhm.
yeah, if the author has the, ability to read it well, I think, that'd be a great option for them. They might need to go through some training to get there,
Yeah.
because I think it is a special skill. I mean, like, I would never attempt to read a book out loud myself as an audiobook. But, I think if you got a little bit of training, and you work with a recording studio that's, experienced in doing audiobooks, then
Yeah.
you should be in good shape.
Yeah. Now let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about you as an author. So, how did you get into writing?
Well, so I've been a writer my whole career, but for advertising.
Yeah.
And so I've, written ads, just, TV commercials, all that my whole life. And then in 2018, yeah, I just kind of, I in 2015, I started going through, like, a rough patch where, I wasn't happy with my career, and I decided in 2018 that I was gonna write children's books. I heard a quote, somebody said something along the lines of, "We spend the biggest part of our careers giving our creativity away to other people," and that really hit me hard because, like, that was literally what advertising was. I would be
Mm,
super creative. So a bank could sell checking accounts, or I could help, Verizon sell phones.
yeah.
And it really is like, oh my gosh, I need to do something for myself.
Oh my
So
God.
I
That really resonates with me so
does
much.
it.
That you're saying yes. And I'll tell you a story, but I'll let you finish first. Go on.
Yeah. So like, I heard that quote when I got into my car after work. And by the time I got home, I'm like, I'm going to write children's books. And I
Yeah.
told my wife that. She's like, great. And then I'm just like, I have literally no idea how to do this. And I had to Google how to write a children's book. And, um, but yeah,
So
so
why children's books? Why did you gravitate towards them?
well, I figured, like for me, in my mind, commercials are like little stories.
True.
I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, if I could do a little story in 30 seconds, I should be able to write like a picture book that's more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's what, kind of made me want to do that.
And what are your books about? Tell us a little bit more.
So yeah, so my 12th book just came out this year, um, which uh, the most recent books are a series called the Emotion series,
Mm,
and they're called the 4 books are the Shy book, the Angry book, the Sad book, and then the Angry book will be coming out later. But they're books to help kids deal with, like, their big emotions,
I love
and they're written from the book's perspective. So, like, in the sad book, the book itself is feeling sad, or the
yeah.
shy book, the book, doesn't wanna be read because it's shy. So, um,
Oh,
yeah, so those are, the most recent ones, but, I have a book called The Old Man Eating Alone, which, just like the title says, is about an old man eating alone, and a little girl kinda sees him, and they strike up a friendship, and she's just so sad because he's eating alone, and he just tells her, he's like, "Well, I'm not alone. I have all my memories with me." And so
oh,
he tells her the memories of, his wife and, the great life they
oh,
had. And then, not to be a spoiler, but so the old man dies at the end, and
oh.
but the girl has her memories of the man. So,
Oh my gosh,
uh
that's so sweet. That reminds me of my daughter. I don't know why. Every time we go to a restaurant or a coffee shop, she notices the older, people sitting by themselves. And she'd be like, Mommy, I'm so sad. Look at, like, and she wants to, it's like she almost wants to walk over and sit down with them. Like, go, Sophia, keep them company. I'm sure they have something to share, right? But she
Right.
notices those older people. Maybe she thinks of her own grandparents as they're kind of aging in front of her. But that is such a beautiful topic. I love that.
Yeah, well, what's so funny is, like, it was inspired by my youngest daughter, who was just like
Okay,
your daughter. She would
okay.
just I mean, she would start crying,
Oh,
and especially if it was old men eating
yes,
alone.
that's my daughter.
It's
Like, that's my
hysterical.
daughter. She'll be sitting at Starbucks. She's messaging me, Mommy, there's this older man and I'm doing my homework and he wants to know about my homework. Good, engage him. The poor man is there by himself. Maybe he'll give
Right.
you some ideas for your homework, right?
Yeah, that's so funny. But yeah, so, like, that book was very easy to write because it was just like my how my daughter felt, and I just kind of put a little story around it.
Oh, I love that. Now, are
Yeah.
you, is your daughter a writer as well? Do you find that now that you have written a book, you have opened this sort of, you give people the permission, people around you, family and friends to also write?
Not really. So
No.
that my youngest daughter, so she's, uh, she's a very empathetic person. So she's actually a doctor.
Oh,
Y
nice.
Yeah, which tracks for her. My oldest daughter, who is a lawyer, she is actually also a writer too, and we've written 2 books together. Um,
Nice.
yeah.
That's
So,
so lovely.
that's been amazing. That's been a lot of fun to do that. Um But yeah, so, another book that I have is about a little boy who loves his tablet so much that he wishes he never had to let it go, and his wish comes true, and he wakes up one day and he's attached to his tablet,
Oh my
and at
gosh.
first he thinks it's great because he gets to play all the time, but then he realizes he's missing out on life, and he wishes he wasn't, attached to his tablet.
Oh my gosh. That is so good for these times. So good. Any other ones?
Yeah, let's see. I have a one called, Sally Ann McFidget-Bottom. It's about a little girl who can't sit still in the classroom, and, not through any fault of her own, but she just can't sit still, and she causes chaos and gets in trouble, and, she gets sent to the principal's office, and the principal tells her that, he used to have that problem too, and he learned how to control his fidgets, is
Yeah.
what I called them. And
Yeah.
so it's a little bit about, like, kind of mindfulness and meditation of, just kind of allowing your thoughts to, just observe your thoughts, and that allows you to kind of calm down.
Um, I wanted to bring it back to the point that you mentioned about us giving all of our sort of creativity to, the company that we work for, because we're all passionate about what we do and we give our
Mm,
best. I had this same realization in the past couple of years. And so this really resonated with me because I thought, oh my gosh, like all of these projects, especially this last project that was, pretty big that I ended up developing for a small, portion of the company. And then it was so successful that they adopted it for the larger company, which is like, 50,000 associates in Canada and US. And then, once we kind of put the product together, the program together, off it went, it was sort of running on its own. But then I thought, but my name is not on it. It doesn't say
yeah,
like, Rivka, like when I leave 2 years from now, I created it, I made it successful, but my name is not on it. It stayed with the company. I leave the company and it stays there and no one will ever know that I'm the one who created it. And I had
right.
so many of those examples and I said, listen, I am too creative. I'm happy to contribute, but I need to do similar to you, something for myself, for my legacy, for my, for my kids, for my family, something that I can claim that is mine.
Yeah, no, I totally get that feeling, and, you do wanna do a good job, and you do want to see you want to help your company succeed, but
Yeah.
yeah, then at the end of the day, it's just like, "Wait a minute, you
Yes.
know, why am I helping somebody else get this level of success where it's
Right.
fully coming back to me?"
Yeah. Yeah. What else should we touch on, Howard, that you feel like it would be a good sort of message to share with people that are thinking about writing a book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and I think the the best answer I could give is, like, don't wait, just do it. It's
Yeah.
just like, if you have it in you, whether it's a fiction or nonfiction, you know, there's somebody out there who wants to read what you have to say. Um, if it's important to you, I believe it's important to somebody else. And so, write it and, don't overthink the process too much because I think that also causes a lot of overwhelm and, it stops people from doing it. But like with my children's books, it's just like I didn't think about I want to write about this topic or I want to write about that topic. It's just whatever came to mind, I just wrote it. And if it landed with somebody and they saw the same thing that I was seeing, it was successful. And then, but I have plenty of manuscripts that never went anywhere because, other people did not have the same vision as I did, and
Yeah.
that's fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, for people thinking about it, I mean, the best thing they can do is just get started. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's like that action creates the momentum, and once they start doing it, once they start seeing some progress, um, without putting any judgment of whether it's good or bad, just like, oh my gosh, I've made a whole page of, words that kind of are saying something important. I think that gives people the kind of the desire to keep on going.
Yeah. I've heard an author say that, once she decided that she was going to write a book and she started really kind of thinking through it on a daily basis, the ideas just started flowing. And she said the best thing that she did for herself is to just start capturing notes in her phone. Whether it was early in the morning, she's having a coffee and something came to her mind, like whether it was an example of something that happened when she was younger or just like, you know, a quote or two, she would put it in her phone. She's, driving her kids to school, something else came to her. She's like, voice memo to herself. Next thing she knows, because she started thinking and committed herself to it, she had so much content that she just had to put together and add a few more sentences. She goes, it was easier than I thought, but I had to commit myself to it. And then you just got yourself in the right, I guess, mindset to keep going.
Yeah, no, that's great, and, like, I'll email myself all the time with
There you go.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, what's interesting about doing that is just, like, you could have a random idea that you don't think has any place, it doesn't belong anywhere, but
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, 2 months down the road, you'll be like, "Oh my gosh, that's the perfect story for this," or, "That's the perfect example for
Yes.
what I'm trying to communicate."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right that, initial commitment, opens up so many doors, for thoughts and experiences that could lead to, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Now, would you recommend sort of doing the research on your competitors? So let's say you decide that you're doing a book in the sort of self motivation genre. Would you recommend going out there, kind of researching who are the competitors and what they're writing about, or will that kind of maybe um, make you a bit overwhelmed and perhaps set you back a little bit? What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I think you should have an awareness of what's out
Mm,
there in the marketplace, because, what really is that's really gonna help as far as positioning your book. So just
right.
like if you're writing about whatever best diet to live your best life, you know, finding out that what those other books are is important because then it allows you to say, "Well, here's my take on this, and here's what makes my book different." So,
Hmm.
whether you're self-publishing or going through a traditional publisher, it gives you that sort of, differentiation. So in
Yeah.
addition to your own personal stories, you have this kind of viewpoint that the topic may be the same, but your viewpoint is, completely unique and your own.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a great suggestion. Now, if someone wanted to hire you, what's the best way for them to connect with you? What's your preference? Email, social? What's your preference?
Yeah, I mean, going to my website is probably the easiest.
Okay.
It's just my name, howardpearlstein.com.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, and they could connect via social if that's easier for them as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Howard. I have no doubt that this will make a difference. Like I said, I know so many people, the 86% that talk about it, but it's just, getting into it, committing to yourself, and maybe getting a little bit of help with, with a ghostwriter, that accountability that's required. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. Really appreciate you.
Oh, well, thanks for inviting me, Magdalena. It's been a lot of fun and look forward to talking with you again.
Talk to you soon.